Welcome once again. I'm Charlie Greenberg, your host and moderator for Digital Business Demos. This is the series where we provide live business demos that focus on different digital transformation and platform strategies, and in particular, demonstrate different components and products within Software AG's digital business platform. And today, we're continuing to discuss dynamic apps and show you some more about this exciting and comprehensive platform that orchestrates multiple tools and technologies to ensure rapid and high-quality application development. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from Nandan Kadami, Senior Director for Product Management, and Nandan will be joined by our Senior Director for Product Development, Michael Jonath, who will be demoing today's dynamic app solution. But first, I'd like to point out that today's presentation is brought to you by Software AG, a 48-year-old organization well known for customer-centric innovation. In fact, Software AG is ranked as a leader in many innovative and digital technology categories. We have more than 4,300 employees, $1 billion in annual revenue, and we can cite over 70% of the Global 1,000 as customers. And those customers include well over 2 million developers at leading organizations who have adopted Software AG products to innovate solutions cross-industry, cross-private and public sectors, and who rely on Software AG to complete their journeys as digital enterprises by using the end-to-end capabilities of the digital business platform. Before I pass the presentation over to Nandan, please keep in mind that following our presentation and demo, we will provide, as usual, a Q&A session. So please use the WebEx Q&A box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen at any point in this presentation for any questions and comments. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Nandan Kadami.
Thanks, Charlie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all from wherever you're chiming in. My pleasure to introduce and talk about the Dynamic Business Orchestrator as a part of our Dynamic Apps platform. So this is a continual journey. If you, I think a couple of webinars ago, we did talk about the Dynamic Apps platform, and please refer to that as our overall positioning. And one of the core and integral part of the platform itself is the new Dynamic Business Orchestrator, and we will delve a little bit more into it. So what is the whole engagement platform and the shifting application landscape, right? If we look at where our DBP fits, is we have a lot of connectivity into the back office. And typically, if you look at your back office systems, which are your ERPs or order management, their capabilities and characteristics are pretty stable, efficient, and standardized. But if we look at the newer applications that are being built, they have the definitions of agility, they need speed, innovation, differentiation, and quick turnarounds as well. Some of them are situational, and some of them can actually change the business landscapes. So the engagement systems are actually all around the innovation applications that you are building, and the DBP is pretty vital to build such applications. So when we talk to many of our customers, and when we look at the market, the conversations have actually changed from earlier. If we look at BPM, it was very process-centric, very transformational in its nature. But now the things are moving more and more around engagement and applications. What's the market really seeking? They want to create differentiating applications which minimize the risk, right? They don't want to have long multi-year projects that actually are truly transformational before they can actually see the results of it. They also don't have the luxury of time to spend too much to realize the results. That means they need to accelerate the deployments. And from a perspective, they need to be able to change the patterns. That means they have a relative template of a logic, but then it needs to be dynamic. It needs to be able to adapt based on the events, based on the context of what the applications are being built. So net, everything is all about apps, and underneath the layers are basically your application platform, which provides variety of such capabilities. So what are the challenges for such an application? So one of the things is, the primary thing is, how do you create and change these apps efficiently? Which means it needs to be dynamic, based on context, based on business rules, based on events that are happening. You should be able to rapidly innovate. One of the things that I like to call is fail fast, fail forward, to test out the markets. And things that become very, very efficient and very productive, you want to actually bring that in and then make it standardized and roll out as well. So that means you should be able to create and change these effectively. Also, different work scenarios. You want to actually innovate fast. That means you cannot rely on your heavy IT tooling and heavy waterfall models to create such applications. These applications have the capabilities of doing agile. You should be able to rapidly prototype, but once that's actually proven, you prove and test out the market, you should be able to bring it back to adapt to make it more enterprise ready. So again, the pitfalls of choosing not choosing one platform would be, you will have to throw away some of the innovations that you have done and recreate everything. That means a longer time to market. So the idea of having one platform to do both types of work is very important. Also, when we talked about the back office being standardized, you still have done a lot of the back office work, which is connectivity into your core ERP systems, connectivity into your order management systems. But then the applications that you're building could reuse some of the logic, some of the services that are actually built to create net new apps. So you need to have ubiquitous connectivity. And another capability and characteristic of the applications are, you want to have real-time analysis around analytics around what is happening, because how would you measure the effectivity and efficiency of the applications that you are doing and outreach that you are actually creating. So having ubiquitous analytics and real-time analytics associated with the app provided by the platform is also very important. So how do we do this? This is another level of developmental approaches that we see. We call it it's tool speed IT. You might have heard bimodal applications, which Gartner calls it. So it's basically mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 is typically IT driven, so they move slow. It's pretty waterfall in its approach. The requirements are pretty much standardized, and you have to know everything ahead of time. It's pretty stable and system of records. It's traditional programming. Takes a longer time to approach, but it's also very heavyweight enterprise grade as well. On the right-hand side, it's mode 2, which is low code. It's innovation and differentiation of the applications, right? It's fast, rapid development. So it's basically shifting applications, shifting requirements. You want to prototype something fast and experiment in a market. That means it's pretty agile in its nature, and it's mostly configuration or driven by your mostly your business analysts or even shadow IT, or some people call it, which is not your super heavy-duty Java programmers, but mostly skills of macros and Excel level skills as analysts that they can actually assemble and prototype such applications. So I take some examples of some of the markets that we have actually seen, right? I think if we, one of the paints customers that we have seen is actually based in Netherlands. They have offices, about 40, 50 offices around the world. They have a bunch of these applications based on SharePoint that they have actually created. But these applications are pretty localized and regional in its nature. And famously, one of the CIOs said, hey, if we turn off 70% of such applications, people wouldn't even notice, in the world. But then there are 20% of these applications that have become bigger, robust, there is more requirements that are coming in, and they want to make it enterprise grade. But then they could not. They had to throw away everything and build it back into your IT system when such a scenario approaches. So the point is, if it's an application that is actually built on low code, how do we actually move from low code to high code and reuse the same thing? And that's the key message that we have learned, that it needs to be one platform. So so where we are seeing in terms of such kind of work patterns, there are things from structured, which is process automation. Examples are order to cash, customer onboarding is another example. Things are the kind of applications people are building, other workflow-based applications. Typical thing would be your reviews, approvals, patterns of work management, document management would actually come in such a document approvals would come into that. And dynamic case applications, which is your basically complaints management, service incidents, dispute resolution, which are some of the patterns that we see, which are much more dynamic in nature. So some of them are, so you can actually have the patterns from moving from completely structured onto the left to dynamic onto the right, but it needs to be a single platform on which you can actually build. So in the example that I was giving earlier, how do you then intake a complaints management application and make it such a big, robust application? Meaning, is it a case management and also use the things like your customer onboarding and customer management as a standard application and mix and match together? So it's basically the continuum of moving within from dynamic to structured and vice versa. So the apps platform actually brings you such a capability. It is visual forms, coded logic, and API enablement, through which you can access the backend systems, which is ubiquitous connectivity, as what I call it. Orchestration, that's another important piece of the puzzle where you can actually have processes, structured processes, tasks, rules, cases that are associated with it. Then the channels of outreach, right? You have web, mobile, social, IoT, which actually brings various styles of events and the context to your application. And ubiquitous analytics, which is very important for your operational and discovery of the patterns, so you can do things like next best actions, etc. So in a recent, I would like to bring why we talk about this orchestration as an important piece is in 2017 CIO survey with Gartner, they interviewed close to 200 plus CIOs, and the question was asked around the impact of digital technologies on the business. And the top two things that came out with the 89% and 84% are advanced analytics and process-centric applications. So have the most impact on the business. And coincidentally, digging deeper into that, which actually says both of them affect the top line and both of them are complementary in nature, because with the analytics, they drive some of the processes and they change the shifting landscapes so that they can address newer requirements faster. So the point there being the application builds in variety of the platform brings in variety of these capabilities to use, right? Which is the business orchestration, which is the process orchestration patterns, rules, which has business rules, process logic, integration logic, built-in collaboration, discovery through customer journey mapping. It has analytics associated with machine learning and IoT as a pattern. We are also building in RPA and collaboration associated with it, and many and advanced analytics through the dynamic activity monitoring. So specifically around the business orchestrator and where it fits in, it's basically the days of actually figuring out all the business logic of left to right or top down is pretty old, and it's not technically possible. As I said, with the changing outcomes, you need to be able to change the processes much faster. So we have built this new orchestrating engine specifically catered to that, through which you can inject new processes, change the outcomes based on certain goals. So what are the capabilities? It's basically design simplicity. One of the things we are introducing in this engine is the API-based design, lots of BPMN2 semantics, which is pretty standardized. It's faster and dynamic runtimes. It's with lots of step injections, meaning you can actually create your business logic left to right, but if you want to change the flow on runtime, on the fly, you should be able to do that, provided you have the rights to do that. So we have introduced such capability to do that, which you will see in a minute in action. Ability to pause and fast forward a process. If you think that there are certain steps that you want to accelerate the process, you should be able to do that. And in terms of architectural advancements, it's clustered and reduced overhead. From a visibility point, it has monitoring and inbuilt analytics associated with it, free-form text search through which you can actually power faster results, including millions of records coming out with very fast result searches. Built-in notifications across the board, and then you can have personalized actions associated with it as well. Digging in a little bit deeper on some of those things that I briefly mentioned, we will be introducing web-based modeling, but for the first attempt, it will be based on the Eclipse models. But it has API level modeling as well. So on runtime, you can actually have a machine build a process model for you. So that's actually something you can do. It has better semantics, much reliable and much based on BPMN2. So it is actually semantically correct. Dynamic step injection. So if you have to take compensation ad hoc actions, you should be able to do that. And you can validate the models as well in design time, runtime, or through API. From a runtime perspective, it's very scalable. It's basic. We have the footprint of the engine is pretty small. It's clustered, and we don't. It's truly linearly scalable and not distributed. I mean, we don't have lots of network hops that we have to do to actually run the models. There are no transitioning documents, no messaging layer dependencies. There's an improved disaster recovery built into it, and the cache maintenance is optional with Terracotta Cache. From the life cycle perspective, we will be having a built-in command central to manage the deployments and manage the landscape installation, etc. But also overall auto recovery of data, data in cache for resubmission or NDB. Storage of the data is also pretty simple. We are actually uses the audit. And net, it will be the footprint for your BPMS as a service, which is coming down in the pipeline as a part of the roadmap. Finally, some of the monitoring. I did talk about built-in analytics. You will see that in action, but I think we have when it's pretty much seamless from a modeler, where we believe in you want to decide your business logic and analytics should power itself, and that's truly what we have done. Is you once the process runs, you have out-of-the-box dashboards. You set in the business goals, and it will start tracking. It will give you notifications and alerts, and then you have a chance to personalize those alerts as well. And and all of this is built in using our business console, which is actually built with Angular and Bootstrap technologies, which forms well for mobile as well. And then with the mobile business console, which is already available as a hybrid mobile app, you get personalized notifications, and all of them will be built in according to that. Also, that gives you a chance to customize the look and feel as well. with the app spaces and the gadget development, you can take either choose the out-of-the-box monitoring tools that we have provided, or you can actually customize it because you may want to reduce the amount of data, or you want to add your custom data associated with it, custom dashboards. We have a chance to do that without having to go back to scratch and write everything. So lots of important, and we have looked at our customer base as to what they have done in the patterns and then built it in as out-of-the-box features, and you should see that in a minute. With that, I will hand it over to Michael for a demo. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nandan. Let me just share my screen here. And hello, everyone. My name is Michael Jonath, and I'm the Senior Director of Product Development here at G, with a focus on dynamic applications. As Nandan mentioned, the applications building have a very strong process component. And we at Software AG have offered an engine to run business processes for quite some time, and it's been known as Process Engine. It's also been a fairly static engine where you, in a structured way, create a diagram of your business process, such as the one that we see here, that we're calling luxury line order. And then it runs this specific series of steps in the same way every time. You know, applications today, as you said, have become much more agile and tend to be more contextual as well. And there may be times when you want to change the business logic while a certain instance of a process is running. And therefore, we've introduced a new engine called the Dynamic Business Orchestrator, which architecturally is much more sound and able to be flexible and change at runtime, as well as the other benefits Nandan mentioned around performance, footprint, and setting us up for BPM service. What I'm going to lead you through here now is just a flavor of running a process. And we have to remember that it's within the context of a larger application that I'm not going to be demoing now. I'm going to primarily on the process piece and not the user interface and all the other elements that compose a full business application. So within that application, you may, let's say it's a shopping cart, there may be an order that is placed. So in this case, we have a nice simple set of steps. We start, we receive an order, we check the customer information, process it, send it to logistics, look at the shipment type. Based on the shipment type, send it either the same day, 2-day, or 5-day delivery, and then you confirm that delivery. So a fairly straightforward business process that we'll want to execute. I've also gone ahead in this process down into simpler stages. If you're, and this really is for kind of tracking and for a simplified view of your process model as it runs within the context of an application. So rather than seeing all of these steps and having to track, you know, where we are in each one, we broke it down to 3 basic stages of, you know, receive and process the order, some kind of logistics stage, and then fulfillment. And each one of these stages can have properties associated with it that say how long they should take, and whether, you know, and you can decide this right now at design time, or you can do it later. You can define the kind of SLAs in an administrative UI to determine how long should the stage take, and should we be notified if we're out of compliance. You know, it's basically setting an SLA for each of the stages of a process. So I'm going to go ahead and kick one off, but instead of doing it through a UI, I'm going to just do it through showing my developer roots here, and just going to publish a document that corresponds to this order. And I'll go ahead and just give it a name, just so we can look at it later. And so we'll have an order coming in on Wednesday, and we've got an invoice and a shipment types. Very, very simple. And now my process is running. Now I'm going to flip over to the business console that Nandan mentioned. And what the business console does is it has a dashboard here for all of the processes that are running. And sure enough, we see this demo order that we just created appear here. And just to give myself a little time, I'm going to set a breakpoint on that process so that it will come and pause at a specific step within the process. So what are we looking at here? Well, we are looking at an instance of this order having been placed for some luxury goods. And we see that it's started and the first few steps have started running, but the third step of processing order is still going. There's no green check mark. It's still in a running state. And we can see, how long has it been going? We've got the up in the top here, the duration, the status. We've got some basic information about the process. We've got a really nice ugly ID if you want to see the system view of the process, and a nicer ID that shows the label for this instance. A summary of the steps and how long. We see some a panel here in case there are any errors or any alarms, and we should keep an eye on that, as well as any kind of logged data from the data that's flowing through your application. The individual piece of data can be logged, and as we'll see in a minute, for search purposes as well. So this process is running. We see it's going slow here at this process order step. One thing I may want to do as I'm interacting with this process model is figure out, what's going to happen. Is this process stuck here? What's happened in the past? Which are taken most frequently, and how long do those paths take? And as we think about this in a more dynamic viewpoint, what actions can I take if the process, for example, is taking too long? And we can treat this process as almost like a little mini case management application where you could take some kind of corrective action or put some compensating process in if you find that the process is taking too long. So one of the tools that helps us know, where we stand and what to do next is this path forecasting tool. And you'll see that when you select it, it can show you the most path, and then it has different paths through the process that when you mouse over, you'll see the path going through the shipment type of 2-day delivery, which is the most common. You'll then see it going to the 1-day delivery or the 5-day delivery. And each one of these, if you click on them, you can show statistics, and it will tell you, what's my estimated completion time? How complete am I right now? What's the average cycle time going through this path in the process? What's the whole process cycle time when it goes on this path? And how often does it happen? So it looks like 31% of the time. Now this information, where does it come from? Of course, it comes from historical data from previous executions of the process model when this application has been invoked. So we're in the background gathering this kind of historical data to help you inform you, not just from a general analytics viewpoint, but really in this specific case. I'm looking at one instance, and I want to have a broader context may happen, so I can do something else. Now in this case, I did kind of secretly in the background set a break in the process, and what that does is it says, I know I'm running here. When I get to this step, pause. And if I refresh the status here, I will notice that this process order has in fact completed, and I have paused at the logistics step. I've reached this pause. And I'll also notice, if I look over to the left, there's an alarm that's gone off. Now, what is that alarm? That alarm is the stage that we had set earlier about receiving and processing the order is supposed to be done. In our case, I made it so we didn't have to sit here for days, 45 seconds. Probably might take longer than that. And it should have been 45 seconds, but in fact, it took a minute for that stage. So there's already an alarm saying, wait a second, this order is going slow. You may want to have it go down the same day delivery. In our case, I want to take an action to apologize to the customer that this is going too slow. And I'm going to go ahead and invoke a whole separate process. So this is where we get into the dynamic nature of this processing. And I'll draw your attention here to this actions panel. And when you see a process instance in the middle of executing, you don't just have to watch it go all the way through. we can take some actions on it. We can cancel it. We can start it if there's been an error, and the restart includes, modifying the data that's in the process if there was a problem in a back-end system, skipping steps, pausing as we've just done now, ending a whole track through your process, going to a specific step, or injecting a process. So in our case, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do it from here. You'll see the same menu. If I inject a process, I can look through and see I've got a whole list of processes that I can inject, and each one I click on, I'll see that there's a little preview of it. Now, I don't see any processes that I want to inject to apologize to the customer and send, send a compensating note to them. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new process. Now, go back over to the designer here and create a new process. We'll just say apology note to customer. And we'll make it really simple, where process will start, and then we'll add in note, and then we'll finish. Something nice and simple. And change the name of the step here. And save it. Now, this is the point. If some of you are familiar with our prior products, in order for this process to run, you would essentially have to compile it down into more base elements that the engine understands. And this made it for a longer life cycle for you to make modifications to processes. Is that compilation phase could require a significant amount of testing and back and forth, and could be quite time consuming. In our case now, with the new engine, the engine will interpret the model directly without any compilation phase. And therefore, I can just upload this model, and the engine should be able to pick it up and execute it immediately. So that upload is just this button, and it says, look, the process has been uploaded successfully. So I'm going to go back over to the business console. Whoops, I hit the wrong refresh there. My apologies. We go back over to the business console and get this process instance again. In just a moment here. Here we are. And here's the instance that we were running. And I'll look at the details again. And now I'll go back to inject the process. And while we're waiting for that, we can see that there's also a timeline that's been created that shows the stages that were defined. So if you don't want to see the process as a whole diagram, you can just look at the timeline. And I'm going to go ahead and inject process, and sure enough, there's this apology note to customer process that we just created. I'm going to say inject it and then pause again. And we'll see it's been dynamically injected in this instance of the process. So this will not apply to future instances necessarily, but just for this one instance. So now if we refresh, we'll see it's still paused because I said to pause after the injection, but we see a little icon here saying something's happened. And if we go into the step summary gadget here, we'll see there's an apology note to the customer that's been added as a step in the process. It was just injected right there dynamically. And well, what is that? Well, we know what it looks like. We just created it. But if you want to see details at the runtime, there it is. We clicked on it, and we see that right there, there's a whole separate process that is run. An apology has been sent to the customer, and it's been completed. And now we can go back and look at the original process again. And then if we like, we can go ahead and resume and refresh, and we'll see that the process has completed. So this is just a really basic way of interacting with process models at runtime in a dynamic way, and this can be, again, for more different style application, when you need to do something that's compensating, when you see something is taking too long. So all of these actions are user and role controlled, as well as the kind of processes that you can interact with to inject is permissions based as well. So not anyone can walk up to the system and do this. And as Nand had mentioned, the don't even necessarily have to be created in our design time tool. As part of Dynamic Business Orchestrator, there's a new model API, and with that model API, you can programmatically create process models even without a design time tool, and then upload them to the central location, to the repository, and have them available for execution. So you could have a super dynamic process that not only injects a process, but injects a newly created process via API. So there's some really interesting patterns that can emerge when you start doing that. And in the meantime, we do track, what kind of interactions you've done through this process through this control actions. So the control action says when we've set a breakpoint, when we've redirected to another process, and that we've unpaused the process. So you get this whole list of control actions. So I think the basics of having an interpreted engine that can respond at runtime to dynamic contextual change, as well as having some of the historical information that can inform those choices. Pardon me. As well as, in this case, there are no errors, but there's, we have a little alerts panel that will show if there are any errors along the way in the kind of social media style notification framework. In addition to interacting with individual instances, we've provided a dashboard here that makes it easy to interact with aggregates of instances and to find data you're looking for. So, for example, as you would expect, there's a nice search facility here, and I can just search for all instances that have a custom ID. You're just in a sort of Google-style search. We have a way of searching based on individual processes as well, and you can scroll through your list of your processes here and pick one. Once you've picked a process, you can also search based on specific data inside that process. So we'll introspect structures and say, hey, if I have any orders that contain the name Steve inside the data, I should be able to run that and see, I've got 3 that have inside the data, which was what I was this particular demo. Pardon me. So there's a whole bunch of search facilities that are quite intuitive, based on time, status, based on data in the process, based on custom data, and allow you to really pick out the interesting processes to you. We also provide visualizing by status, and this is responsive to in the query below. You can see the last 5 that have been completed, or if you say show all, it will run a query and show you the results there. So interacting with these process models has become very easy, and it also shows you which ones have been modified along the way. So if we did inject a process or skip a step, for example, we have a quick way of determining which of the processes that have been modified to. Beyond the process instance level view of your applications, there's also ways of looking at more aggregate data. So in this case, what I'm looking at is, how is data flowing through the process overall, and which paths does it take through the process most commonly. And it'll give you a sense of cycle times and rule violations along the way. There's also a more advanced analytics page. And again, this is out of the box without any extra coding. It comes pre-configured along with the Dynamic Business Orchestrator, is that you can get an overview of how your individual process is performing, as well as the stages. Of course, my server doesn't want to cooperate with me right now. And there we go. You can see the stages And here are those same 3 stages that we created of the receive and process order, logistics and fulfillment, how many of them have started, how many are running, how many alarms have there been. So we've seen, oh, there must be a problem here. I've got 14 alarms on this receive and process order stage. So if I go back to the overview and I see those stage alarms, so the same 14, I may want to inform someone about this and say, you know, something is wrong. So very quickly, there's a way you can just send an email to someone. And you could put in an email address, and it pre-populates the details of, you know, what is going on here. We've got this stage alarm. We see the start time and end time, and we've got an alarm count of 14. You can similarly assign a task within our workflow engine for someone to, you know, so if you want it more formal than just an email, it will queue a task in an inbox that when they go to their dashboard, they'll say, oh, I have a task to look at, you know, what's going on with the order processing because I'm getting alarms on that particular stage in the process. So all this UI it comes out of the box with the intrinsic metrics for processes and the stages that compose processes. Obviously, if you have more specific needs for data-based metrics, you can also create your own KPI, display those as well. These are just showing the intrinsic out-of-the-box ones. And furthermore, you don't like the RUIs at all, but you're still interested in all of the process instance and stage information, you can go ahead and create your own dashboard. And I won't go deeply into it, but just to show, we have something called an app space. And you can create an app space and essentially give it a name. Create your own dashboard with your whatever kind of layout that you like. And then the bits of UI that we are showing in our own user interface are available for you to customize and add here. So I can add a gadget, and then when I see that gadget, you know, there's something like the process header I can add there, and to configure it, I can just put in an ID here and view, and very basically you've got, well, this probably isn't the best example, sorry, but you can take bits of our UI that we saw of the process header and create your own. So you can add diagrams, you can add your own KPIs, and this app space is editable and then can be shared with members of a team. So I think, again, if you're familiar with our prior products, in the past we would provide access to underlying data and APIs to access that, to get that data, and you can write your own UIs. Now we're also pre-packaging gadgets that will expose that data in a nice way, and you can create your own dashboards based on the visual components as well as in an API-based way. So I think just to summarize, we've got a new engine here, user interface, a great amount of agility, control over a process instance, a lot of historical data that's surfaced as context, as well as analytical data that you can take action on, you know, not as part of the process instance, but an overall view of where your bottlenecks lie. And with that, I will turn this back over to Charlie.
Thank you very much, Michael. We appreciate it. And so what would we recommend as next steps? Well, I'm going to answer that. Well, of course, all attendees will receive a YouTube link for the recording of today's Dynamic Apps recording, but also we invite you to download a complimentary Forrester's Digital Process Automation Wave report, and you can see what they thought about this solution or Software AG's Dynamic Apps platform. Plus, we'll customize a demo for you so you can further visualize how you might use this platform to optimize your company's digital transformation. or consult with an expert. We're happy to share real-world best practices. As you can see on the right, under Contact Us, the email address is WM for webmethodssoftwareag.com. And when we get to the final slide, we're also going to reveal Nandan and Michael's email address, and you should feel free to use that as well. But before we go to Q&A, we invite you to join us at an upcoming software innovation tour that's going to be in Washington, D.C. These events that we are having all over the world, we just had one in Chicago, provide a fertile ground for what we call ideas networks, where business and technology executives share inspiration with recognized partner companies and respected experts from around the world. And there's still plenty of time, I believe, to register for this event in Washington, D.C. on November 2nd and 3rd. If you need more information about that, please use the chat box or, again, the webmethods@softwareag.com address. So let's move on now to some questions. First, let me ask some obvious ones. Is there a free trial available?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. This is Nandan. Yes, there is a free trial available. If you go to our tech communities, you should be able to download the whole BPMS free trial, which actually packages DBO. And also, not only is there raw engines, but also sample data, pre-populated dashboards, everything together that makes a quick jumpstart possible. So, yeah, absolutely go there, and we have certain scripts that you run, and you should be good to go in a few hours.
And what about dual availability on-prem and in the cloud?
So currently, this engine is available on-prem, and we have on the roadmap to move this engine into the cloud as well as a part of our overall Dynamic Apps platform. Dynamic Apps platform standard edition is already on the cloud, but this will be as a part of the roadmap. We will be changing the standard edition, which is also known as Agile Apps, to utilize this particular engine, and that's coming up in a very short while next year.
Thank you, Nandan. And to attendees, remember it's not too late to add in questions to the Q&A chat box on WebEx. How is this webMethods Business Console different from monitoring a process instance through MWS or My webMethods server?
Okay, so Business Console is basically about, we've introduced Business Console 2 years ago, and this is built completely on our Angular and Bootstrap, essentially to make it responsive web, right? So this was done, the journey started about a year and a half or 2 years ago, but if you look at the underpinnings of the technology, it still is an application on top of My webMethods. So My webMethods, the old monitor and the old pages that you see there, they were built on a different technology called portlets and JSF pages. So that has actually moved now to Angular and Bootstrap and different types of technologies. What we generally call as open, you might have heard, OpenCAF or OpenUI. So predominantly, why have we done that? It's a small history chain. Is we have seen that proprietary portlet technology is A, expensive, and B, for us to compete with the ever-changing plethora of JavaScript libraries that are coming up on a pretty much on a monthly basis nowadays with newer versions, it's going to be very, very tough. And B, the adoption from the market, what we have also heard from our customers is that you have lots of skills of JavaScript and Java skilled people available to create these applications very fast. So why don't we adopt it? So we basically inverted the game on our head, and we said instead of being closed, we basically opened up our engine to adopt any particular JavaScript libraries. So we allowed developers to bring in React or Angular 1 or Angular 2, so on and so forth, to build these UIs. So that's how we started this journey, and we said if we are asking our customers and our field to do that, why don't we internally develop an application? And that's how the business console was formed. That we created the face of BPMS using such technologies. So what we have seen, what Michael has shown today, is actually the extension of it. So when we are building this new engine, the monitoring pages is actually being developed using this gadget or open UI technology, which is hosted in the business console.
Can we search?
That answers.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on the end there. Can we search across processes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one of the search, when Michael did showcase the search widget, which actually you can choose a particular process, or you can actually choose all and do things like log fields, which will be your business data, and which searches across your landscape for all processes, or for status, for business data, for errors, what have you. So yes.
And time-based searching as well. That goes across processes.
Yep.
Thank you both. And just to point out what I mentioned earlier, you can see both Nandan's and Michael's email addresses at the bottom center of the screen, so please feel free to contact them, particularly if questions occur to you once we've gone offline. Is headless development possible using this?
Yes. Short answer, absolutely. So one of the things that we believe, which is first API first for any development, right? I think when Michael was talking about API-based process design, that's also one such pattern. The entire monitoring UI and extensions into what we showcased as app spaces and gadgets is basically following that same mantra of actually creating these UIs using APIs. So the point to drive there is, yes, we have all the APIs for you to take advantage of. So you can run the engines headless, and you can use the technology of your choice to create compelling UIs. You can mix and match, meaning what they have provided as gadgets, you can use them and combine them with your custom UIs. And create compelling user interfaces. It's pretty much an open game, yes.
And here's a follow-up to that same question regarding headless development. Can I use some other UI tool to develop the UI of my app and leverage automation capabilities of your process engine, or do I need to use Software AG tools?
You can pick a technology of your choice. So we have known many customers having things, they have WebLogic or any other different portal technologies that they have standardized on, and they have been using our engines, both Task Engine, the new DBO, or the Process Engine, etc., to create their applications. So short answer, yes, you can use, when we talk about being headless and having an open API, that's precisely what we are enabling, that we don't force our customers to use our technology, but actually open it up to use their technology of their choice to run, monitor, and manage their applications.
I'd like to thank again Nandan Kadami and Michael Jonath for providing more insight into Dynamic Apps, which is not a platform that you necessarily can experience in a holistic way in one session. That's why we're going to be doing it again. It's something different, of course, in the beginning of November, and as you can see, we continue to provide digital business demo presentations, including an interesting one, I think, on November 8th. Not that Dynamic Apps isn't fascinating, but something that involves giving voice to your business application integration, and one of the co-presenters will be Alexa. So in the meantime, have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.